Hello, kiddies. Meet the Joker.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Joey Galvez here at the MCDC podcast, where we talk about the big two. This week is going to be a special week where we talk about only DC books. So we got some really cool books here for you guys. We're going to talk about Man of Steel number 4 and 5, Justice League number 2, and Batman number 49, and Detective Comics 983. So I got a little behind on my books here, guys. Sorry about that. I took on a contract job, and I've been spending a whole lot of time working that. So I'm finally getting around to my books now. We're going to have a special treat, a special DC-only edition here, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this as much as I did reading these books. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see at the end of this what kind of ratings I give these books here for you guys. And, just sit back and enjoy. Here's some really cool music by Fortress of Graves, and enjoy, and we'll come back and talk about these books. All right, guys, let's talk about Justice League number 2 here. So overall, when I was reading this book, there were some areas where I kind of laughed out loud, and I had to share a couple of things with my wife, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, if you're gonna say that on the show, you really need to, because that's funny." And you guys will find out when we get to that point. But this book was it was up in the air. It was like up and down. I don't know if I could give it a great rating, but then I read it and I was like, maybe, but I'm still kind of wondering where they're going with this book here. So let's kind of just jump into it right here. So it's Justice League number 2. It's the Totality Part 2. We got Scott Snyder as the writer, Jorge Jimenez as the artist. We got Alejandro Sanchez on colors. So we open up the book here and we see Lex Luthor, and he's kind of standing in front of a American flag. And at this point, I was like, oh no, are they really? Because in the that Superman book that we saw, and he was talking about wanting to run for president, and I was sitting there thinking, oh man, are we really going to see it in this book here? But then we flip the page and we see that this guy is even more sinister than I thought he would. He kills a whole bunch of old guys in this little, I guess it would be the equivalent of like of an old, like a World War II guys, what is that, VFW hall or whatever you guys want to call that. So, but like he just kills these dudes, you know what I mean? He's like, and he blows them up. It's pretty crazy. And he's got, he's talking about this. He's got this symbol again, the same symbol that we saw in the first Justice League book here when we saw Martian Manhunter, and he had it on that table, right, in the boardroom that he had for all the Justice League members, right? And now we flip the page here. We see John Stewart, and he's got one of these guys. He's doing his thing, right? He's manning the universe there, and he's got somebody behind bars there, and he's been looking for this guy for quite some time. He's talking about needing to teleport him somewhere else, and he's talking to the Guardians and keeping in touch with them, right? But we see here, and I won't go too far into who he's got back there. You guys just can read it and find out who he's got back there. Anyway, but what really intrigued me here was really cool that we got Swamp Thing in this book, and he shows up and he's talking about, I got a message for you to bring you, you know what I mean? So out of nowhere, he brings in Batman, and Batman's talking to him, and he's like, how the heck are you guys doing this? Are you got to be kidding me? Batman, what's up? And he's like, I'm here on behalf of Martian Manhunter, and this was the only way we can get in touch with you. You switched off your comms. You kind of just been ignoring us, I guess, basically. And he's like, we've been trying to get into contact with you. He's like, The Guardians didn't want anyone knowing about this mission. It was their request. And he's like, well, I have a bigger request. Join us on the Justice League today, now. This was like what first moment I was like, dude, Batman, you're kind of a jerk, dude. And John Stewart even says here, he's like, slow down. What's going on, dude? What's up with you, man? And Batman shows him just this scary looking skull type thing, and he tells him that about the whole story about the totality and how it landed on Earth here, and it took the shape of this face, this head, this skull type looking thing. And he says, as we know, a week ago, an energy force containing all the power of the source wall landed in the Nevada desert, and we're calling it the totality. He says it's created a protective shell around itself, shaped almost like a head. Deep in the shell lies the totality itself. It's been sending out a code. As the Lanterns learned, the multiverse is dying. Well, we have to be reminded about that again, guys. And he's like, I think that might be the key to fixing, but we need your help. He's like, Hal's dealing. He's like, why couldn't you get Hal to do this? He's Green Lantern of Earth too. He's like, Hal's been dealing with something. He's held up kind of thing. And he's like, come on, John, this is your deal. We need you kind of thing. And he's like, we're running out of time, John. Justice League Dark has hidden the totality, but the word's getting out. People want this. And he's like, well, and you hear kind of screaming, people shouting in the background. He's like, whoa, dude, where are you at? Where are you coming from? Where are you broadcasting this from? And he's like, the other day, Killer Croc of the Suicide Squad, Waylon Jones, like, again, did we really we know who the Killer Croc is, and we know what team he's on and this kind of stuff. Anyway, he's like, he went into the shell, and minutes later, he rematerialized near Belle Reve prison, but he's been transformed. And we flip the page here, and we see that that Killer Croc is now this huge, crazy-looking, mutated form of Killer Croc with these crazy spikes on his back, and he almost looks like a T-Rex almost. And we got the Justice League; they're fighting him, and they're doing their thing. They're going back and forth, and we see Flash here. Flash is trying to run and do his thing, and he trips up, and he can't get in. He's like this. There's some kind of something in the Speed Force that's not letting me access my powers completely. So something's going on there. Something's disrupting the Speed Force. And now we go back to John Stewart, and he is now able to transport this creature they call Grelock, and he's transporting him to wherever they need to transport him, right? So now we see, and he's like, well, why didn't, if you're here on behalf of Martian Manhunter, why didn't he come himself? He's like, he's being held up. So now we see a big, huge Martian Manhunter in the form of a big, huge gorilla, and we got Justice League. They're all wrapping him up. Wonder Woman's got him. Waylon Jones in her lasso of truth. We got Hawk Girl up there. We got Batman and Martian Manhunter, and they take him down finally. And now he's out for the count, and now they're all on the floor here, on the ground here. And he's like, Martian Manhunter's like, how'd it go, Batman? He's like, I can't tell. I don't know what's going on. So they still don't know if John Stewart is going to help them and jump in on this and help them join the Justice League in that moment. Now we go back to Lex Luthor and the Legion of Doom, and they're talking about how they are on this base, and they're like, well, this is, and Black Manta's like, this is an undersea base, and how is it that I have no idea of where this is? I have no knowledge of this. And Lex Luthor says, no one has knowledge of it, Black Manta, save the people who made it hundreds of years ago. And so we get this idea that this underwater base has been there for years, hundreds of years, and not even Black Manta knows about it. So now they're talking back and forth here, and So he's just talking to him about these stuff, and this is another area that kind of got me up here. He's like he got me here. So he's talking to Gorilla Grodd here, and Gorilla Grodd's like, I didn't join this group just for some mystical mumbo jumbo. I joined because I want revenge on the speedster for what he's done for. And then Lex Luthor interrupts him. He's like, and you'll have it, Grodd, but on a scale not imagined before. Look here. He's like, this totality is the key to everything. But to control it, we must first unlock the 7 hidden forces of the universe. Forces that the source wall made nearly impossible to access. That's what the totality code is telling us. Each force is something one of you has been looking for, or her whole life, whether or not you know it. And he's showing them this doorknob again that we see in the first issue that he beats Vandal Savage to death with, and it's got that symbol on the front of it. But now he points out, he walks them over to this glass box, and it has a baby inside. And this is one of that moment I was like, what the heck? There's a baby. We don't know who it is. It's still pretty vague on what this baby here is. Anyway, he tells Gorilla Grodd, he's like, he's telling him, I already unlocked the first force. This is this is one that will destroy your enemy, Grodd. I couldn't have done it without the help of a true evil genius who's right over here. Come say hello to your new partner, Grodd, and don't be afraid. And it's a baby. And he's like, he was changed. And he's like, what the heck is this? It's a baby. Grodd, pick it up. Wait. And he's like, wait, is this who I think it is? And Lex says, connect to him and find out. And then he tells him some more stuff about the forces here. He's like, as for the second hidden force, Sinestro is already on his way to claim it. A section of the emotional spectrum of off limits until now. Beyond that wall, they think are tiny, insignificant fireflies flickering around a graveyard, waiting to be jarred. And as you see here, Gorilla Grodd is picking up this baby, and he's like, oh man, the power. And this baby's eyes are glowing, and there's power, emanating from this baby. So now we flip the page now, and you see the Flash, and he's building this car, right? And then you hear Hawk Girl tell him about how to build this car and how to fix it. And he's just like, hey man, I've been building cars, and I've been dealing with cars since the Model T. I know a little bit about cars. She helps him fix it, and whatever she told him was exactly what he needed. But now he's talking about, there's a speed bump in the Force. He's like, my guess is it's an old villain of mine, Turtle. Emphasis on old. And I guess this guy, Turtle, he wants to access something called the Steel Force, which is the complete opposite of the Speed Force. And I don't know where they got this idea that he thinks that this is him doing this stuff, and that's why he got tripped up on that little speed bump where he couldn't access the Speed Force entirely. Very weird. And if you didn't think it was already weird, it gets even weirder, guys, here. So then we got Martian Manhunter and Superman come in, and they start to talk about how Batman has created this vehicle, Batman and the Atom, I believe. I can't remember. I gotta look it up. But anyway, they create this vehicle that Ray Palmer, yep. So they create this vehicle that can be shrunken down and I guess ingested or inserted into Superman and Martian Manhunter's body, because they are the only ones who have the chemical makeup to withstand the entering into the totality. So we got Batman, and I guess he's inside of Superman's body somehow. And now we got Martian Manhunter, and he's asking Kendra, Hawkgirl, to pilot the other vehicle that is going to be inserted into Martian Manhunter's body. So this is all kind of weird, and I didn't expect that. I think it was like something that I saw on Magic School Bus before, right? Am I right? Did anybody else think that when they read this? That's the first thing I thought when I read this. I was like, I saw that on Magic School Bus. Anyway, so now we flip the page and we see that Sinestro here kind of gets the drop on Jon Stewart, and he's like, I used to wear green and I used to wear yellow, but now I'm gonna wear purple. I don't know. This is anyway. Anyway, he's like, the lantern who just unlocked the invisible emotional spectrum, and you can be my first recruit. And you see that Jon Stewart is getting engulfed in some kind of light, and he's being, transformed. Now we flip, and we're in the Nevada desert here, and we see Superman and Martian Manhunter, and then they're in these really cool looking suits that almost look like Iron Man type suits, right? So they're walking up to the totality. You see Wonder Woman, Flash, and Aquaman, and they're in the Hall of Justice, and they're watching on monitors and listening in on what's going on as they walk up to this totality, and they get some static, and they're like, oh, we might lose you guys while you guys get, because the closer you guys get, there's some kind of interference here. And then you see Kendra and Batman, and they're in the Martian Manhunter and Batman's body, and they're in these vehicles. So now, as they walk up to this, they are entering into it, and they definitely do lose the Justice League, and they can't communicate with them. So now we flip back, and we see that the people that are in the Hall of Justice, they hear somebody talking in the background, because they're talking like, oh, we hope that everything's all right. They're going into uncharted territory, and then somebody comes in and they say, and you hear somebody off screen or off panel here, and they say, by shield of day and shield of night, we feed and grow beyond all sight. And then Aquaman says, what the? And then he continues, your darkest self shall be our night. Wield the sword of unseen sight. And Wonder Woman says, Green Lantern, what are you doing? And he says, I am Jon Stewart, head of the Ultraviolet Corps, and now you will all die. So now we see him, and he's in purple, and he's like super powerful, and he's taking on, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, and the Flash here. And now we flip over to the next page here, and we see Cheetah and Grodd and Manta and Lex Luthor here, and they're holding up this baby. And I guess Cheetah is kind of looking like she's like, there's something fishy going on here. And she slashes at Lex Luthor's face, and his face comes flying off, and we see that it's a Lexbot. And Lexbot's like, believe me when I say I've been many places around the world, and he's like and around the universe, but all of those places, this place where I am now, just might be my favorite. And he starts laughing, and you see that he has his own vehicle, and he is inside Superman as well. So he's shrunken down, and he's got a vehicle of his own, and he's inside Superman's body here. And then this is where we're left off here. And I thought it was a little weird how they left us off here, because we get this, this commentary, this person, I guess, telling us what's going on, and they're, because for the first time since Kansas, maybe for the first time in his life, he was telling the truth, not just about his location, but about everything. His enemies, they were full of lies. They were lying to each other, and we get this kind of thing, and this weird monologue, this outer monologue, and it's not super. I just thought this was weird the way they kind of finished this up. We didn't see anything like this throughout the entire book, but then at the end of the page we see somebody telling us, like it's telling us a story or whatever. Anyway, now we see that this is the last page, and it says, next, the tech of the Ultraviolet Corps. So this was a little weird, guys. that's it. It got weirder and weirder, and I was like, that magic school bus where they went inside somebody's body, and it was just out there for me. Artwork was great, but the story, I don't know where they're going with the story. I really want to know what the heck this totality is and what's going on and why it's shaped as a face. Come on, give us some answers. Number 3 is coming up. You guys know that I got that number 3 thing going on where I need some answers by the 3rd book, at least a little bit of answers. So we'll see where they're going with this. Just on artwork alone, I'm probably going to give it a little bit of a higher rating. Dialogue wasn't too crazy here, but it was just, the story was just kind of all over the place. This is the 2nd one already, and it was just getting weird for me. It just, they threw a curveball at me with them building a vehicle to be injected into somebody's body, into Batman and into Superman and Martian Manhunter's body. It was just a little weird to me. I'm just wondering where they're going with this and what's going on, and I don't even know why they're even in their bodies. Whatever, we'll see where they're gonna go with that, where they're gonna take this. So if I'm gonna give this a rating, I wanted to say 5, but I might, just because the artwork was awesome, I might say 6.5. I'm still hopeful for this book, guys. So this is gonna be my review for Justice League number 2, The Totality Part 2. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next book. We've got Detective Comics 983, and we've got Brian Hill as the writer, Miguel Mondancha on pencils, Diana Egia, sorry if I butchered that name, on inks, and we've got Adriano Lucas on colors here. And the price for this book is $2.99. And guess what, guys? We got a guest star on this book. It's Black Lightning. And I guess we were actually hoping that we were supposed to be getting Black Lightning on the book last week, but I guess they got pushed back here a little bit. But now we've got it on this book here. So we open up the book, and we are here in the newsroom, the Gotham newsroom, right? And we've got the news reporter, and she's talking to a Batman fanboy. And, anyway, and later on we're going to know why we talk about this. But somebody is watching it on TV, and the last panel there, when you see her, they talk about, she says, Batman, if you're listening, maybe you'll follow this Darren kid on ViewTube and give him your biggest fan an outfit too, because she's talking about they're talking about all these different he's around the same age as like Robin and the Signal and things of that nature. But now we see somebody whoever's watching this, they threw something at the screen and broke the screen. And that's typical of a villain who's pretty upset when they see a news anchor talk about somebody that they don't like, right? We've seen that in so many different times in movies, and that's what we get here. So now we are 1 week later, and we see the Signal, and he's doing some pretty cool acrobatics, and he lands on a fire escape, and he runs into a building. And who do we see? We see this kid, this purple-haired kid, Darren, sitting in a chair, and there's a sign around him, and he looks pretty beat up, and it says follow this. And Signal comes in, and he's trying to help this guy, and he's trying to untie him, and somebody comes up behind him, and it looks like this person's got a mask on with a big red dot where his eyes are supposed to be. And when I saw this, it made me think of the Bat Tim of Tomorrow, right? When they had that thing going on here, and I was like, oh man, they're using this whole thing again, where you got that big bright eye in the middle again. Well, we're gonna find out who this is later on, hopefully in the next couple of books here. But we see him. He comes up on Signal behind him, and he's like, you're making him weaker. And Signal says, who? And then this guy clicks a button and blows up the building, and you see the Signal just get tossed out of the building and land right on a car there. Next thing you see a bunch of panels here, and you see that Alfred is taking shrapnel out of his arms and legs and limbs and things of that nature. His cowl is cracked in half. He's got blood everywhere, and Batman's there at his side, and it looks like he's not doing well at all. And Batman says, you're going to be all right. Next panels we see that Martian Manhunter comes up, and he's there, and Bruce Wayne is there, and it's Batman. He's not in his full garb. He's there as Bruce Wayne. He's got these really cool sunglasses on. He's like, I called Clark, and Martian Manhunter says, Clark is occupied, Bruce, but I'm more than able to deliver a message to the Justice League. And they talk a little bit here, and he says, I'm going forward with my team initiative. That means I have business in Metropolis. And he says, you want Jefferson Pierce? And he says, I don't see potential in him, or I do see potential in him, as do we all. The League is willing to help you. And they're talking back and forth about this kind of stuff. And then it seems as if Bruce Wayne is kind of upset, and he's like, I've got business, dude. I've got things to do. You're kind of I got the idea of like, he's like, you're wasting my time kind of thing. So he kind of pushes Martian Manhunter out of the way, and we're back in the cave again, and you see Duke here. He's laid out, and he's got bandages everywhere, and he's like, I guess he's in a I don't know if he's in a coma or whatever, but he's still kind of in and out of it, and so Alfred pulls out a device, and he says, I found this inserted into one of his wounds, and I'm sure it appears to have it's a data drive. And Batman says, this must have been for Batman to find. Alfred says that's usually the case, how it unfolds. And Bruce asks him, run a multi-service scan for malware and update me on the results. And as soon as possible, let me know. And he's like, okay. And then, Duke kind of with a very faint voice says, Bruce, he said, we make you weaker. Now we are in Metropolis, and we see Black Lightning trying to, he's fighting this guy with a white mask, and this guy's got a hostage here. And he tells Black Lightning, "You're not Superman. He flies with the sun. You can't stop me." And we got an inner monologue here going on. And he says, "No teaching job is easy. I'm going to warn you. The odds aren't on our side." And I think we got this monologue type of thing going on because in a few different panels we go in and out of the present and a back a flashback. Where Black Lightning, and he's the principal of a school, and he's trying to hire somebody, and he's telling this guy, he's trying to give him a kind of like a pep talk into, don't do it for the money, don't do it for the credit, because you're not going to get much of either. Do it for the difference that you're going to make in these people's lives, these kids' lives. They are a part of the Metropolis everybody has forgotten. And then you flip back to another panel, and this guy says, he's going to kill this girl that he's got this as this hostage. And Black Lightning subdues this guy. This guy pulls a grenade, and he's going to blow him and this girl up. And Black Lightning engulfs him in his electricity type powers, and he moves this guy up into the air, and it blows him up there, and he saves the girl. And he's telling her, close your eyes, keep your eyes closed. And, then we flip back again to the flashback, and he hires whoever this person he is talking to. And we flip back to the present again, and he's got this girl in his arm. He says, just keep them closed. Just keep them closed. And he says, welcome to the Metropolis that the rest of Metropolis forgets. So now we are back in this random person's home, or the person who broke that screen. And I'm sure it's the same person who blew up Duke, right? And this news lady that was the same news lady that was talking to this Darren fanboy kid is talking to, I guess, his mother, and she's talking about, I'm sorry that this happened, and this and that, and she kind of goes on and on with that stuff, right? I'm not going to go into too much detail about what it says, but because I want to touch more on the rest of the story here. So now we're back in Metropolis, and it shows Black Lightning, and he's in his day-to-day, he's in his suit and tie kind of thing, and he walks in home, and he puts his stuff down, and he's got this formula up on a whiteboard, and he's sitting down at his desk. Now he's looking up at this stuff, and he's trying to figure out how to I guess work this formula. He says, and now we hear a couple of word bubbles here, and it says, that girl owes her future to Black Lightning, to you, and that madman chose his own fate. And then he turns around and he sees Batman there, and he tells him, you would have found a way to keep that psycho alive. And he says, you always do. And Batman says, you're doubting yourself, Jefferson, wondering if you have the power to do what your heart tells you need to do. You need to be done. And he says, you're looking forward to pathway. I have one for you. Come to Gotham. And he says, is this how you ask someone a question? And that's Batman, right? Batman doesn't ever ask anybody. He tells people. We always get this kind of Batman that nobody likes, that he's just this hard dude, right? That he never asks anything of everybody. He always tells them what to do, and everybody's just kind of. And anyway, that's at least what we've been seeing everybody write him as, right? And he says, recently I've received information, problems, potential, and active. I need a team to solve these problems. I have the members, but I need someone to lead them. I've been their mentor, but I need a teacher. So that's why he's got him, because he's a teacher, right? And he says, he's like, me after what happened after last time, I don't need someone who always succeeds, Jefferson. I need a man who knows when he's failed. Bruce Wayne owes me a favor, and he kind of tells me, Bruce Wayne owes me a favor. He's got a plane, and once if it's gonna meet you here at 6 in about 6 hours, and if you're on that plane, if not, then we know your answer. We need you, right? And he says, I don't want to be the man that tells Batman no. So we get that idea that he's probably gonna show up, and then Batman says, your calculations are wrong. Your suit, with your suit. Some modifications can help you enhance your power with much less energy output. And he says, well, I'm an English teacher. I'm not a electrophysicist. And I guess he's talking about the formula that he has on that whiteboard that he was kind of looking over and trying to figure out how to make it work. So now we see that Batman has disappeared, right? He does the Batman thing and he's gone. And he looks at his clock. He's like, right, okay, 6 hours. And then now we flip back, and we're back in Gotham, and we see some guys shooting at the cops out of a car, and Batman's gonna go in there and take care of these dudes, right? And he does, and so we hear Alfred come on the comms, and he tells him, hey, there's no malware on this drive, but there's audio here, so he tells him to patch it into him. And Alfred says, don't be upset with me if I don't want to listen with you. So he's playing it now, and I'm gonna read it word for word for you guys. He says, I imagine I've made you rather angry, Batman. Your able mind wonders who I am, but my identity is irrelevant. Consider me a pure act of karma. I'm what happens when good men lose their way, when they distance themselves from their purpose. Purpose, Batman, a single word that means everything. Once you were something glorious. Now you're a novelty, a brand that you share with unworthy children. Why do you even wear that costume? And no one is even afraid of you. And he says, Bruce. So we get this idea that this guy, knows his identity, and he says it again here in a couple more panels here. It says, you've dismantled your own creation, given it away piece by piece until there's nothing left. The night no longer belongs to you, because Batman belongs to all of them. Look at yourself. And then we see a handful of people. He subdues these guys. He stops these guys, right? And these guys get, Anyway, now we see everybody on the street, and they've all got their phones out, and they're all videotaping and recording Batman take these guys out, right? And he says, slapping your precious symbol on people who don't deserve it. Do you even remember what that symbol means anymore, Bruce? And again, he says his name. Now Bruce is looking around on the street, and he's like, all these people are recording him, and he has to get out of there somehow. So he throws a couple of smoke bombs, and he gets out of there. And we see this guy continues to talk to him. He says, I'll rend the weakness from you, fat from the meat. You saved me once, and now karma has come to save you from all of them. And these people are clicking and taking pictures of him getting out of there and this stuff. Now we see Cassandra, and she's looking at her watch, and I guess she's talking to Alfred here, and she says, Duke hurt, want to see him to help. And this is always kind of funny because she always speaks in sentence fragments, right? So Alfred says, Miss Cassandra, I'm afraid Master Duke's condition is severe. He's receiving care, but I'm not certain you should see him like this. And she says, I've seen bad things before. And she beeps and she turns off her. I guess she was talking to him over a watch. And she says, I'm sorry. Or somebody says, I'm sorry. And then you hear a car bomb go off. And you see this guy on top of this car, and she's about to go and start fighting this guy. And he says, sorry, but you're making him weaker. And we see the same guy that blew up Duke, and he's on this car, and he's got a gun pointed at her, and they're about to fight. And that's the end of it. And it says, next, Batman's Karma. So, this book was actually okay. I didn't see too much problems with it. I'm sure there's other people out there that read it and saw many problems with it, but this is my opinion. I did like this book and how the pacing was a little bit better than usual, and I did like the idea of this book, and I did like what's gonna happen, and I do like that somebody's picking off all of Batman's, all of his Bat family type of thing, and I do want to see where they're gonna go with this. I do like the artwork. There wasn't too many, there wasn't a lot of words and stuff. Like some people do get a little wordy, but I didn't feel like this was a little too wordy. As for rating, I think I'm going to give this probably about a 7. I did like this book. I did like it was a little bit better than usual, and I am pretty interested in seeing where they're going to go with this. So that's going to be Detective Comics 983. So let's go ahead and move on to our next book. Our next one is Batman number 49, The Best Man Finale. So we've got Tom King on the script, Mikhail Janine art and cover. We got June Chung color, and this book is about $2.99. And we leave off where we saw on the last one where Batman's kind of laid out. Joker is in that chapel and he killed everybody, and Joker is, about to go and, so he's got Batman subdued and he's got a gun, and Catwoman comes to Batman's rescue, and that's where we left off, right? So now here we go. This is where we are. Batman and Joker are at a standoff, and they're facing each other, and this is here it goes. And this is that part where it kind of made me laugh a little bit, and anyway, let me just read this a little bit for you guys here. Let me read what the interactions that they got here. So we see Joker, and he says, remember the old days. Penguin and the umbrella. Is it a gun? Is it a helicopter? Riddler and the puzzles. Ooh, riddle me this, Batman. He says, Ivy and the plants, Scarecrow and the gas, Mad Hatter and the hats, Two-Face and the twos, Freeze in the cold. And that right there, I was just like that. I read that first part there, and I didn't even get like 20-30 seconds into reading this, and I've already got my palm to my face, and I'm shaking my head no, right? So, and then he says, you and the cats, me and the smile. And again, here we go, palm to face again. And he says, it was so fun. But you know what was odd about the whole thing? And she says, Catwoman says, what? It was fun. And we all laughed because it was fun. But you, Selena, you were there, but you never laughed. And she says, yeah, you're right. That is odd. And he shoots at her, and she does all kinds of crazy acrobatics. It just keeps shooting, bang, 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 bang. And literally, guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels, 6 panels, 7 panels of him just, there's no words, but that her flipping around and him going back and forth shooting, and it says bang, 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 over and over and over again. And that's all we see. And we see her make some weird noises. She says, "Row," and he says, "Ah," and then she says, and here's again, she meows like a cat, and she hisses. Oh my gosh, like this is again, I think I slapped my head millions of times reading this book, and I sat there and said, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But then in that last one, I had to read it a couple different times to see actually what happened here, because you see when she meows and she jumps on him and she throws her cracks her whip at him and slashes at his throat. At the same time, simultaneously, she slashes his throat. He shoots his gun, and it looks, and you can't really tell that it hits her, but it does hit her, right? And it says later, and they are both laid out next to each other on the ground. You see Batman about 20, 30 feet away, and they're laying there, and he's got his gun, and he's got it pointed towards Catwoman. He starts pulling the trigger, and there's no bullets, right? And he says, and this is again, there's just banter going back and forth here, guys, and it keeps on going. These like later, it shows you this little thing. It says later, and it gives you this idea that they've been laying here for quite some time, right, without any words, and then all of a sudden they start talking to each other, and then here we go. So we got an interaction here, and he's like, "Why does Penguin have an umbrella? Is that a thing?" And he says, "I always thought it went with the tuxedo. Penguins have tuxedos." And Catwoman says, so tuxedos and umbrellas, that's a thing. I don't get it. Oh my gosh, I think I just killed some brain cells just reading this part. Oh man, it's just so, I don't know. I read an article last week or a couple weeks ago, and people are ranting and raving about how great Tom King is and how he's humanizing these characters. If this is humanizing them, and I don't know, I dare I say he's dumbing them down. I don't know. I don't know if I should say that. Maybe my show will not be as popular anymore. It's probably not popular anyway. Just saying. So now he says, like in the movie where the man dances with a tuxedo and an umbrella, and she says, no, it wasn't an umbrella. He had a cane. He says, oh, did he? I'm pretty sure, she says. And he says, well, then I don't know. I was like, oh my gosh. And this entire time he's grabbing his throat and he's bleeding a little bit, and so and you get this idea that he's going to bleed out if he lets go. And Catwoman tries to get up and she can't, and she like kind of cringes, and she grabs at her side and she gets back down, and she can't do it. And she says, I figured you would have asked him at some point, you two always seem so close. And Joker says, no, I was close to Harvey, and Harvey was close with Oswald. Oswald was really so straight. I was related to more crooked fellows, he says. But Harvey, bless him, could go both ways. And this was like, oh my gosh, guys, what are they talking about? This is so weird. Like, I don't know. It just made me feel uncomfortable reading this. It was weird. She says, yeah, Harvey held a lot of us together. People forget he's underrated. I always thought he was the dark horse to get Batman. I saw him last time I was in Arkham, she says. He says, oh, how is he? Joker says. And she says, Harvey, he could still go both ways. That's so, it made me so frustrated. Whatever. But anyway, this is the interactions that we get with them. And it just goes on and on and on like this for quite some time, right? So It's just so horrible. Some of this stuff, guys. It's just I don't know. And he says, Selena, can I ask you a favor for old time's sake? She says, sure. He says, I'm all out, and the a full magazine is in my left pocket. I can't get it with my right hand and then load the gun. But if I use my left, I'll go. I'll let go of the artery and bleed out and die. So if you could just reach into my pocket there and get it out, you hold it up. I'll reload as you hold it, and then I can shoot you in the stupid face. It's like, really? Okay. And she says, well, Joker, I don't know. If I do that, I'd let go of my wound and bleed out and die. And what would be the point of shooting me? It's like, oh, this was rough, guys. Rough. I see what he's trying to do here, and I understand that he's trying to create something here that's like trying to show us that they have a history and that they're kind of, I don't know. I just I'm not a fan of this kind of his writing, you know. Anyway, let's continue. So, and then they talk a little bit more, and he says, he says, okay, that's true. That maybe then I do let go, load with my left, bleed a lot, but I do have a few seconds to do it and get it pointed at you. You can't move to defend yourself, like you said, so it's possible. And she says, yeah, that's good. A few seconds, I'm pretty helpless. You'd have to do it fast and might even live if you're fast enough. It might work. And then it says later again. He says, and he asks her, why didn't you laugh in the old days? Weren't you having fun? And she says, you know how it is. Whatever we did, he was better, so we just kept losing. I only laugh when I win, she says. And he says, aren't you winning now? And he says, she then says, all I'm doing is dying. And Joker then says, yes, but death is kind of a victory, I think. It's the punchline to the joke. If you've told it well enough, you can take your bow. And then she says, when I was a kitten, I made up this joke. When things got hard, I think about it. It didn't make me laugh, but I liked that it was there and it was mine. Then they're lying there for quite some time, it seems like, because it says later, and then they start talking again, and Joker says, I heard you were getting married. Congratulations. And she says, thank you. And then Joker again says, after quite a little while, and he says, Did Edward ever tell you the theory about me? And she says, didn't you know? He told everyone. You aren't crazy at all. It's all an act, and you're normal. You're just trying to be crazy because you think crazy will set you free. You actually understand. You suffer for what you did, or you do. And he says, yes, I do. And yes, I see. And what do you think? And she says, I think I can't take Edward seriously, not until he shaves his sideburns. I don't know what he's trying to pull off, but he's not doing it. And he says, agreed. And this is that point where we see, everybody's going to be reading this, and they're going to be like, they are making them, Tom King's making them, humanizing them, and he's bringing them down to our level. They're just like me. This is what me and my friends would be talking about if we were frenemies or whatever they would call it. So this is just, I don't know, myself, I'm reading this, and I'm just like, oh man. This is, I don't know, I'm not a big fan of this right here. Let's kind of move on here. It says, is it going to be a big wedding? All superheroes gathered around. That'd be nice. And she says, we haven't talked about it. And Joker says, you should talk about it. These things can't be done at the last minute. Trust me. And she says, I've got a dress, or at least I stole it. He says, you criminal. Does he know? And she says, no, he'd be mad. And he says, yeah, he'd be mad. What's the dress like? And she says, I don't know. It's off the shoulder with black lace going down all the way down. It's really nice. And then Joker says, well, I hope see you long enough to be buried in it. Whatever. And so and this is whatever. So, right, and we keep saying this. He says, well, later again, it says, we all loved him. We wanted him to love us. That's everything. But he never loved us. He always loved you. Why? And she says, I'm prettier than you. He says, you are you? And then she says, all the bat gossip. What's he doing now? It's all we ever could talk about. All the time you spent obsessing over him. But all of you never knew him. I know him. And he says, he created me. Chaos for his order. I killed his Robin. I killed thousands for him. I gave him meaning. I held him as the rain came, and we laughed. And he says, I heard him. I know him. and then this is the point where he's just like, I don't know. Anyway. So, and we just keep going back and forth there. She says, see, Joker, I think that's the problem. The hurt. You all saw the costume, the frown, and the big black bat was he was misery. So you thought he wanted more misery. You gave him more misery every night. But I am misery too. So I know I saw what he wanted. She said, secretly all he wanted was a little happiness. And Joker says, well, fiddlesticks, I don't think I know that. He's me. I'm him. Of course he wants peace, and I could give him that, and he'd love me. And this, again, he's being creepy again, right? This is so weird. And this back and forth just continues to go on and on and on and on and on. So now we go on here. We flip the next page, and they're kind of going back and forth. And it kind of goes Catwoman and Joker, Catwoman, Joker kind of thing. She says, "You want to hear the joke?" And he says, "I do." She says, "The older brother." And he says, "What's his name?" She says, "Chuck." And he says, "I like it." She says, Chuck tells his younger brother, Chris. He says, "How old is Chris?" 2. Chuck tells his 2-year-old brother, and he says, Chris, if you name 2 letters of the alphabet, I'll give you $20, okay?" And he says, and Chris says, and then she says, and Chris says, okay. And then he just jumps up. He says, "It's time." And she's, "No, you don't." And then he says, "Oh, Selena, I do. Very much I do." And that's why even if it, he says, "Before you marry, I have to save him." Those are the words, guys. He says, and that's why even if it, like I can't even say it. It's just I can't get these words out because sometimes the way Tom King writes, it's just I can't get through it. Sorry for if it sounded like I stumbled over those words, but every time I read that panel, I always stumble over those words. It's just I can't get through it sometimes. And he says, "I'm sorry, Selena. I like you. I love you. I swear. I wish you all the best, but I have to save Batman. I need him." On the rooftops, in the alleys, and as he stands up with the gun and he lets go of his throat and he starts to bleed out, and he grabs the bullets out of his pocket and he starts to reload the gun, and he says, "I need to tell him, I need him to tell me I'm a horror. I need him to hit me. I need to bleed me." And he says, "I need him to stand between me and everything. You don't understand. No one understands. I can kill everything. And I need him to stop me." And then at this point, he's standing up, pointing the gun at Selena, bleeding out. And he says, "If you make him happy, if he isn't Batman, it." And then he, like, his eyes roll in the back of his head, and he falls down, right? And he says, "It's just not fun," as he falls to the floor. And later, it says, and it says, "Cat, are you okay?" She says, "He shot." Somebody off panel says, "He shot me, poisoned me, paralyzed me, but I can fight through it. Just don't move." And she kind of laughs a little bit under her breath, and he says, "We'll make it. I swear. I don't know what the Joker wanted." And she starts laughing, and he says, "But he didn't get it." And she continues to laugh, and then that's it. That's what we see. We see her laughing, and she's got Joker, and she's holding him there as he's bleeding out. And it says, "Next, the wedding." That's it. That's the entire book. I don't know if you guys were bored with how I read it and what it is, but that's what it was with me. When I read it, I couldn't get through it, and it was really rough for me. I understand what Tom King's trying to do. I understand where people are like, oh, he's humanizing them and he's making them, these characters, way better, and he's done so much for these characters, and I love it, right? But you know what? I'm gonna tell the truth. It's not for me. I don't like that his kind of writing. I don't, I just can't get this. I can't get on board, and it's not my kind of. It's not my kind of book, not my kind of Joker, Batman, Catwoman, whatever. And anyway, if I'm going to give this any kind of, and I'm going to say the artwork was awesome. I did like the artwork a whole lot. It was really great in this book. Maybe there was a couple places where I was just like, oh, that's kind of rough to look at. Just a couple little pieces here and there. But for the most part, I like the way Joker looks. He's pretty cool looking. I like the way they drew it a little bit. It's kind of there's them laying there kind of both wounded in a pile of rubble. I think that was kind of a cool visual there. But the whole idea of them just going back and forth and doing this banter and stuff, I get it. But if I'm going to give it a rating, I'm probably going to give it a 6. And I would say 5, but the artwork just brought it up to a 6, and that's sometimes the artwork does that for me. It brings it up a whole notch. And if this was written a whole lot better, I'd probably be up there with an 8, 7 or an 8. But I'm gonna have to say 6 on this one. Artwork was awesome, so. It's just I'm not a big fan of Tom King. I'm sorry, guys. If you guys hold it against me, I'm sorry about that. But I don't know. Did Joker die? This is a big one, guys. Did we just see Joker die? What's gonna happen with this? So and that's probably maybe I'll jump it up to a 6.5 to maybe a 7 because we really see Joker die? And that's one of those things. So if you guys, read it, check it out, let me know what you thought, but for the writing, it wasn't my thing, but because it's such a big issue and we might have just seen Joker die and bleed out, my numbers my rating might jump up just because of that, because we may have just seen Joker get killed here, by Catwoman. So I don't know. I can't really nail it down and say I'm gonna give it a 6 or a 7 on this one, or even 8. You guys read it and you guys come up with a number yourself, or let me know if you like it or what. But for the most part, it was actually okay. It wasn't all that great, but it was okay. It was just the writing was the only thing that got me in some of those parts. Some of the parts it was great, some of the part it wasn't. So that's going to be my review for Batman number 49.
Up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman.
Wherever the target is danger, into the fray leaps the mighty man of steel, racing with supersonic speed to exploding excitement, bolting fearlessly into violence and villainy. No human onslaught can stay him. Super invincible, zooming out of the skies and crashing through into the very teeth of hair-raising peril. A towering hero booming with super action. Sworn enemy of all evils smashing through. His only shield, his super body. At every turn slamming into breathtaking hazards. The superhero of them all. Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a speeding locomotive, leaping buildings in a single bound. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman, fighting for truth and justice. See the adventures of Superman.
Let's go ahead and open up the next book. And on this segment of the show, we're going to talk about Man of Steel number 4 and number 5. So on number 4, we've got Brian Michael Bendis as the writer, Kevin Maguire and Jason Fabok as artists, and we got Alex Sinclair on the colors. And on number 4, we leave off where Kara and Kal-El are fighting Rogol Zaar, right? And in this moment, we kind of see, Superman, he's got this inner monologue, and he's talking about how his cousin Kara is nothing but blind rage. And he said, she's right. He's all, but I suddenly remember something that Cyborg said. And he says, if someone, something, anything comes down hard and fast, they're counting on emotion. They're counting on me not stopping to think, for me to just, react. And he says, and you see a couple different panels in Rogolzar's. They're fighting back and forth, and Rogolzar kind of breaks open this window. A lady falls out, and Superman saves her. And he continues with his inner monologue, and he says, every hit is just an impact, tremors rattling the city. And he says, I have to get him out of here. This punch, I can give it more than an 8. Anything past that, and the city will tip over on its. And then he interrupts himself. He says, that's why we were lured here. Not to drag me through the streets, not to bruise my ego. He says, smart, fast. It's his power. It has to be coming from his staff. And then he says, let's play Batman for a second here. He says, obvious alien tech, alien garb, alien textiles. He knows a lot more about me than I know about him. He defies the laws of physics. And he certainly does hate and then he says, I see it. I see his weakness. And then you see Perry White, and then you see that new chick, Miss Good, and Jimmy Olsen, and they're all on the rooftop, right? And he says, is it Superman? And he says, at least. And she says, you let the kid on the rooftop, Mr. White? And he says, that kid is Jimmy Olsen. She says, oh, this is Jimmy Olsen? I thought he was just the coffee boy. He says, he's both. And Jimmy Olsen says, man, they're moving fast. And Superman then thinks to himself again, he's the sun, the Earth's yellow sun. So I guess this guy's getting some power from the sun as well, just like Superman does. And he says if Earth's sun is boosting him to this power level, he's not fully prepared like I am. Superman then says, I live here. I'm used to it. And then you see a big beam of light from his staff, from Rogolzar's staff, and Superman blocks it. And he says, either way, I have to get him off Earth. And then you see him, we see this flashback again. He says, Clark, Dad, what is that, Clark, kind of thing. And then you see that Rogolzar kind of disappears for a little bit. And he says, I know this trick too. He's hiding in the shadows, studying me, seeing how I react. Seeing if I lose my cool and start throwing around cars. He says, and I really want to, but I can't react. I can't even see him with my X-ray vision, says he. And he says, where'd he go? And then Kara comes in and she says, did you lose him? And he says, he's hiding. She says, why is he hiding? That guy can hit. And he says, are you okay? I don't think he's hiding because he's scared. I think it's because he's about 5 steps ahead of us. And you're just kind of scanning around, kind of looking for this guy. And then out of nowhere, here comes Rogolzar, and he's coming at him. And Rogolzar finally says something. He says, not yet, you. And he goes after Kara, right? And then he hits Superman here, and they kind of go back and forth a little bit here. And now we get this flashback of when that big white light was happening, right, in the living room of Clark's living room, right? So now we see who it is, and we finally get to see who this is. He says, now what is it? Oh, and it says, John says, Dad, what is that? And then we see somebody come out of the shadows. He says, hello, Cal, Lois, young John. I am Jor-El. I am Cal's father. So finally we get to see who this is. On number 4, we see who it is. It's Jor-El. But this is the thing. I thought Jor-El was dead. I don't know if I've been following along, but it seems like they knew that he wasn't dead here. I don't know if let's just kind of read on here. He says, I could tell you I could tell you were his father. He says he doesn't know how to knock either. Cal says, this is really inappropriate, father. And then John says, I forget, do I call him grandpa? And then Jor-El continues to say, I'm here with a purpose. I'm here for the boy. And she says, which boy? This boy, me boy. It's like, that part was kind of funny, and it made me kind of laugh out loud here. And it was like, this is he taking a page out of Tom King's book here? But anyway, he says, my grandson, your son, the son of El, come with me, son. And Kala says, why? What's happened? And Lois says, Clark. And the boy says, Dad. And he says, the son of El, excuse me, hello. And then we flip over, and I guess we come out of this flashback, and now we see Green Lantern here. And he says, I'm the Green Lantern of the sector. Can you tell me exactly what you've seen and heard? And then the lady's talking to him about what they heard, and they said, Superman came crashing into my deli. I have insurance. I'm not insane, but still. And then another lady says, and this is another part. I was like, really funny to me. And she said, do you know that he went back to wearing his red shorts? And then Green Lantern is speaking to, I guess, a Captain Maggie Sawyer is talking to Green Lantern here. She says, I'm Captain Maggie Sawyer, a Metropolis Special Crimes Unit. The big alien perp accused Superman of stalling, which was rude. And then the fight headed down to Puzo Plaza that way. But I did hear him say, and then you see Superman coming too, and you get this idea that he got knocked out or something, and you hear kind of a voiceover of Rogolzar saying it's a cleansing, and then Superman thinking this is not a fight, it's a cleansing, and he says, and I guess they're talking to Green Lantern, and Green Lantern says a cleansing. And when the lady says, the big guy is awake. Oh, and then I guess because Green Lantern had Superman in a construct bubble, right? And he says, oh, hey, Hal, where's Supergirl? He says, I just got here. Hey, thanks for the assist. And then Green Lantern asks him, are you okay? Did you see him? He says. He says, no, the civilian said that he went back that way a second before I got here. Maybe he knew I was coming, and because I was in pursuit. And then this is that part where I was talking about. I was reading this, and then when I was talking to my wife, I was like, "Look at this panel right here," and I'm gonna do this voice as good as I can for you guys, because it reminded me of like my 15-year-old daughter or something, or teenagers or something. Because then you see Green Lantern here, and he's got his head cocked to the right here, and he's holding up his ring up here, and he says, and I'm gonna hold on here because. It's like I'm gonna try to do this as good as for. Let me explain this panel to you first. He says he's out there, and he says I scanned the area. And he says he's using tech and techniques I haven't felt or seen before. But this is that point. let me do it in this, and let me read that whole part again for you guys in the way that I saw it. And so Superman says he's out there, and then Green Lantern says with his head cocked to the right and his hand up in right above his chest, and he says, "I scanned the area." It was like, it really made me feel like this, like he was like, because he's got his hand on his hip. I was like, what the heck is he? I don't know. It was like a little 15-year-old girl here. It was just hilarious to me. and that's the way I presented it to my wife when I showed her this panel, and we just laughed. It was hilarious. And then he says he said cleansing. He used that word, and then Superman says it was my fault for asking. So then you see Rogolzar, and he's got to me it kind of looked like somebody there with their head covered, and they say, they say, who are you? And he says, I'm Rogolzar. And then Superman says, I cleanse the galaxy, the Kryptonian plague. Then we go back and see Rogolzar. Your bloodline must end once and for all. And then he says, Superman says to Cal here, and he says the Kryptonian sickness finally ends today. So I guess he's explaining to him what he said to him. And then now Rogolzar says, just like I once promised Jor-El when I destroyed the planet Krypton. That's when I passed out, he says. So I guess he was telling this stuff to Kal-El and all this stuff. So now we go and we see a big panel here, and there's all kinds of people on the street, and the police officers are trying to get some order. Tons of people behind the police line are taking pictures of. They all got their phones out, and they're trying to take pictures of Superman and Kal-El. And then we see Supergirl show up, and Kal-El's kind of upset. He's like, I really wish people would kind of get off the street, because we don't know what this guy's capable of, kind of thing. And then we have a sweet little moment here where Superman and Supergirl kind of hug it out a little bit, and they cry over Kandor, because I guess he killed everybody in Kandor. And then you see Supergirl get real pissed and then fly off, and he says she's looking for him, and he says, and I guess Superman kind of hears something, and he flies off to the Fortress of Solitude, and then he's talking about because this point right here where, let me read this panel here, because Green Lantern brings up a good point here. He's like the guy says he's here to cleanse Kryptonians. We need a head count and a head check of every Kryptonian we know from Earth in any reality. Who knows how wide this guy's holy purpose spreads? And he says, where's your son? And then this is when Superman flies off. And I guess Superman was going to go and try to get a hold of somebody that he knew who's Kryptonian, or I don't know who he was trying to get a hold of, because he grabs a crystal, and then Rogolzar shows up, and he's at the Fortress of Solitude. And he says, why would you come back here? And then Superman says, I was just going to call someone, but you broke the only way I can get a hold of them. Rogolzar then says, trying to warn another Kryptonian refugee, I'll find them. And Superman now says, you knew my father, and he says, probably better than you. And then Superman says, this entire time I couldn't decide if you were telling the truth about Krypton out of your head, or just doing it and saying everything you could just possibly to get me. And he says, do you have children? Rogolzar says. And he says, have you procreated with the soft earth creatures? And then Superman gets real mad. His whole body almost turns red, and his eyes turns red. He says, my point exactly. He's like, then I thought, just the fact that you tried to so hard, and then you see a big boom, and then that's it. That's the end of this book. And it says, to be continued in Man of Steel number 5 here. And I did like the pacing of this book. They finally gave us some answers of who showed up in their living room with that big bright white light, right? And it was Jor-El, and we see that he's there to get his grandson. And so we're gonna find out why he's here a little bit more here in number 5. But on this one, I'm probably gonna give this one. I'll give this one a 7, because I did like how the pacing. Everything was going very well. There's a lot of action, and it moved very good. I did wish that they gave me a little bit more answers a little bit earlier, but number 4, okay, cool. They didn't give me any answers at number 3, but number 4 they did give me some answers, so I'm cool with that. I did like the artwork. I always love the colors. That's awesome. I don't ever have anything bad to say about anybody on the colors. So that's number 4. Let's go ahead and jump into number 5. Let's see who's on this book. Again, it's Brian Michael Benda's writing. We got Adam Hughes and Jason Fabok as the artists. And we see I'm not seeing any colors, anything here for colors, but I'm sure that we got the same people on the colors. So anyway, we now open up, and we see the first panel, the first page here, is the city of Kandor, and they're looking up, and there's a big, huge eyeball looking down. And we again start off with, and this one's the one that has a whole lot of inner monologue, inner thoughts, kind of a thing here on this book, which was kind of it was okay, but I wish I saw a little bit more of them actually interacting and talking with one another, instead of just a lot of action and then just thought bubbles or monologue bubbles here. So now we see Superman, and he's carrying Rogolzar out into outer space, and he says, "Now I have to get the monster that murdered them all off Earth." So we get some answers here, and he did. I guess we get the answers that he murdered everybody on Kandor, and then he says, I'm dying to know who or why or what this is. What brought on this deep-rooted madness and hate about Krypton? But the reality is, the void of space is sparring me the sounds of his indignation and hate. But here's what I get, what I don't get, Rogolzar. And he says, over the years I have dedicated myself to studying and memorizing the entire history of Krypton. I pored over every detail. I have collected the teachings of all Krypton's greatest minds and names, but his name nor his species has ever come up. Why have I never heard of Rogolzar? So you get this idea that the Rogolzar species is never heard of, and he's never heard of this guy before. Especially because of this deep-rooted hate that he's got for Krypton. And he says, it has to be a lie, but Kandor. And then he says, Kandor again. He says, as much as I desperately want to, I know I can't punch my way through this. I can't fight my way out. But I have to figure something out before he finally, and then we get into, I guess he gets interrupted here. But this entire time that we're reading this, they're going back and forth and punching each other out, and they're going back and forth, and it looks like it's pretty even and equal here. Superman gets a little beat up, so does Rogolzar here, and then you see some more bubbles here. It says, I forget, do I call him Grandpa? And I guess this is going to be the flashback to that part when they were talking to Jor-El in the living room there. And he says, I'm here with the purpose. I'm here for the boy. And he says, my grandson, your son, the son of El. And then we finally get into this, delve deeper into this panel here, to this page here. And he says, come with me, son. And they ask, why? What's happened? And he says, the son of El. He says, okay, whatever you've decided here, Father, whatever this is not how we do things here in this house of El. And then Lois asks, what exactly do you want to do with my son? And he says, no, he's still a boy. So there's still a little bit of kind of things here that we don't know exactly what they're going to do, right? And he says, what I decided, Cal, and he says, is that this boy is struggling by no fault of his own. He is a half-breed Kryptonian Earth product that, by my calculations, should not have worked, and the effort to produce him should have killed your mother for trying. And then and then we get John here acting like a kid. He says, ew, and then Lois says, really? And then Jor-El continues to say, he is unique. It is time to discover what kind of person you want to become. As a man of the House of El, I want to guide you toward those goals. With some of my experience and perspective, John, I wish to take you across the galaxy. I will show you the truths and histories you just cannot get here, or sadly from your father's perspective. He says, but your culture. He says, yeah, I mean, he is my grandpa. And he says, and then Kal-El says, sorry, pal, but this is a hard no. So, and let's just kind of back up here a little bit. So, we got Jor-El here, and he wants to take the kid, right? And he's gonna take him and I guess kind of put him under his wing and teach him the ways of the Kryptonians, right? So cool, but let's see what they're gonna do. And Lois says, wait here. by your culture, he's still a boy on the planet that he is currently living on. So I'm going to continue to refer to him as such. And he says, yes, I do understand your position. He says, John, young man, would you like to come with me for a tour of the galaxy? And John says, that depends. And Lois says, no, John. He says, why not? Because we barely know him. And he says, well, yeah, it's a super complicated family history. So, and you know, he's like, and then John's kind of like, he's like, exactly how much underwear do I need? You, so it's like, John's just being a kid here, right? And then, so now we see, she says, Lois is like talking to John now. She's at his level, and she says, no, I mean, I'm not letting you gallivant off into the galaxy with basically a total stranger. I'm your mother, and I can't allow it. And you see like 2 or 3 panels here with you know, Clark looking almost devastated that they're even thinking about doing this, right? So now he says, first of all, Father, you ask us, not him. And Lois says, yes, that's who you ask. And then Jor-El says, no, I ask him, my Kryptonian heir. And you have me back. And then then John says, you have me back before school starts. And then we see a couple panels here, them kind of looking back and forth. And then John says, I'm going. And Clark looks a little pissed. And, you know, obviously we see Lois here. And she's like, Clark, come on, dude. You don't step up here. So now we go back. And we're back here in present time. And we see the fire chief here. Fire chief, I believe her name is Fire Chief Moore. And she's looking at these different fires on a map here, and she's kind of like, you know, hey guys, does this look like anything to you? And the guys are just being big dumb guys, and they're like, yeah, it's Metropolis, Chief Moore. And one of the guys like, dude, the new deputy chief is talking about the map, like map of the fires. It looks like she's like, what does it look like? And she says, she's asking if we see a pattern, a shape, or a pattern, and what? And they're like in the maps and the fires, and they're like, oh, it's just fires, kind of a thing. So they're going back and forth, and then she says, you know, that's what Batman said. That is probably in the shape. He says, you talked to Batman. You've been here 2 days, Chief, and you're palling up with Superman and Batman. Who's next? And she says, if I have, say, the guy who's lighting these fires, what if it's just fires? So they're just kind of going back and forth, and she's just looking at this stuff and trying to take Batman's, his advice, and kind of looking at him and trying to look at it in a different way, kind of a thing here, right? So now we see them in their, they are headed to a fire again, right? But we see Kara here, and she's got a bunch of kids on a couch, and she's saving them from the fires here. And she's I'm Supergirl kind of thing. So I'm gonna go and skip a little bit here, and then she's like, Superman, yeah, you know, where have you seen my cousin? And she says, Superman, yeah, there was a big dust up here about an hour, half hour ago, and she's off of anyway, and then she says, oh yeah, I was there, but does anyone know where they went? And she says, I mean, I can make some calls. And then somebody off panel says, we'll find them. And then you see you see Cyborg here, and he says, the Justice League takes care of their own. And then Green Lantern says, the Green Lanterns are securing the sector's perimeter, no one in or out. And Batman says, tell us everything you know about Rogolzar. And then Wonder Woman says, did he really get Kandor? And we see Flash say, he says, and I just put the rest of the fire out, just saying, guys, just FYI. So then you see Kara, and she's like kind of crying here a little bit, and she says, he said he destroyed Krypton. He came here, and then Wonder Woman grabs her by the shoulders and says, focus that rage, Kara. Save it for who earned it. And then she says, I know, Diana. I just, if you had seen what he had done. And then she says, where would Cal take him? what if Cal didn't make it? But hold on. And then they just kind of, she says, the moon. What is it? The moon. And she said, and she flies off, and she says, if you can follow me, follow me. And she flies off to the moon, and then she sees Superman there in a crater, and she picks him up out of the crater, and then they take him to, I believe, the Hall of Justice here. And he's laid out on a gurney, and he kind of comes to a little bit there, and he sees the Justice League. Right, and they talk about how this Rogolzar is talking like he's a zealot, right? So they kind of go back and forth, and Batman says, "Did Krypton have religious zealots? Did they inspire any historically?" He says, "No, not like this." He very well may be saying that outlandish thing about Krypton to throw you off. He says, "I thought that as well, Diana." And Batman says, "What does he want?" And he says, "To cleanse Kryptonians." And if it, and then Batman says, "And if it is his belief that cleansing is the answer, if he destroyed your planet to make it." And then Superman just dips out, puts on his suit, and flies right out of there. And I guess whatever he thought of there, he figured something out, right? He says, "It may not seem fair, but Cal can't afford to have you in the battlefield." So Wonder Woman is talking to Kara here, and she's like, he left without me, and he's like, well, he's if this guy really wants to cleanse the galaxy of Kryptonians, he doesn't really want you anywhere near this guy, kind of a thing. So he's kind of, she's kind of talking to her and saying, he wants you here because he knows you're going to be safe here, kind of thing. And then he says, "I did promise Star Labs I wouldn't do this anymore unless it was an emergency. I'm calling it." And he says, and Batman was right. Cleansing. And then you see him go off, it looks like, to the sun. I'm not too sure. But that's where his Rogolzar is. And he says, you see Rogolzar, and he says, if Krypton had to be cleansed simply because Kryptonians lived on it, then now the Earth has to go. So that's what he thinks Rogolzar is kind of doing, because there's Kryptonians living on Earth, and this guy wants to cleanse the galaxy of Kryptonians. Just because Kryptonians live on Earth, he's going to get rid of Earth. So this is what we see here. And then now I don't know exactly where they are, but this place is engulfed in a big bright golden light, and it almost makes you feel like it's the sun. And this is what we're going to see. And it says, to be continued next week in the Man of Steel number 6. So this is where we left off here. This book was the same thing as number 4. Great pacing. The story kept me intrigued enough to continue reading it, and I was kind of on the edge of my seat a little bit there. So I did like this issue as well. I'm probably going to give it another 7. Artwork's always awesome. Colors are always great. Number 1 and number 2, and maybe even number 3. Well, no, 2 and 3 were kind of like womp kind of thing. But the number 1 was good. But these 2 books, they kind of brought me back into it, and I'm looking forward to the next issue. I'm hoping when I look back on this that I would like to say that this little mini series was actually really good. So this is going to be my review of Man of Steel number 5. All right, guys, that's going to be my episode here. I hope that you guys enjoyed. There's not going to be any comic book pop culture news this week. I'm probably going to save that for next episode. Hopefully there's going to be a whole lot in there. It looks like there's a couple of things that I did want to talk about, but I'm probably going to talk about them in the next show. But hope you guys enjoyed this review. I'm sorry that I skipped a couple of weeks, but I'm glad that I kind of did it this way so that I can catch up on some of the books. Next week, hopefully I can talk about some Marvel books on this, but this is going to be MCDC, our DC edition. We'll talk to you guys next week.